The Narcissist, Who is King? Part 1. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. Time and time again, people fail to realize that individuals who wield power and do so in a particularly corrupt manner are often narcissists. These individuals get themselves into a position of power in the first place because they're drawn to it like a wasp is drawn to a melting ice cream on a hot summer's day. This is because power caters to the prime aims better than anything else. Power allows control, which is something that the narcissist must absolutely have. It allows the drawing of fuel, the lifeblood of the narcissist. It enables access to character traits and residual benefits. Power accesses networks, favors. It can enable a person to access money, other fiduciary benefits. It may enable a person to have sex with somebody else as a consequence of that person feeling that they have no choice but to go along with it because there is a power imbalance and they're dealing with such a powerful individual. Power enables the narcissist to nullify threats to control by removing people from positions if they get in the narcissist's way, to demote them, to suspend them, to strip them of their benefits. Accordingly, laying one's hands upon power is extremely important to a narcissist, and that's why many positions of power have narcissists incumbent there. It's also the case that because so many narcissists are drawn to these places in the beginning, it's invariably narcissists that are ones that are best equipped to keep themselves in power after getting their hands on it in the first place. Politics is probably the most obvious example in that regard. It is, of course, the case that power can have a corrupting effect. As Lord Acton memorably stated, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. But that quotation, of course, failed to have regard to who is it who's got themselves in that position of power in the first place. Other people who are not narcissists can naturally have their behaviours affected by the wielding of power. It goes to their head, as people often say. But it doesn't change fundamentally who they are, and there are many people that wield power effectively, fairly, and with a sense of justice. But they are often rarer. That is because it is the narcissists, my gang, that get themselves into that position. And, in certain instances, the wielding of this power is not only effective for the narcissist, but it goes unchecked, because that individual is in a position where, in effect, their power becomes absolute. There is nobody that is going to check them because of the nature of the role that they have, and anybody that might make any such noise at trying to do so is swiftly dispensed with. Often, the manifestation of this power is referenced to the old boys network, or the good old boys in the United States, but it belies the fact that at its heart there will be at least one narcissist that is clinging on to power and ensuring that those around him or her, the lieutenants and the coterie, are serving his or her purposes, ensuring that anybody who starts to lift the layers, makes accusations, tries to take action against them, is moved to one side, is derailed, is suspended, is popped on the shelf, and in other instances, snuffed out. This, in effect, allows the narcissist to behave like a king over their particular kingdom. Often these individuals are referred to as having their own personal fiefdom, where they are completely in charge and nobody dare ever challenge them. We have an excellent example of this, where an evident narcissist has been behaving in a particular way, where he behaves as if he was king of his own personal kingdom. There is an investigation by the New York Times. It's important, of course, to emphasize that there has been no trial of the individual concerned, and the evidence put forward is that which has been obtained by the New York Times. I'll leave it to you, as always, to make your mind up about the veracity of the material, but nevertheless it provides you with a very useful insight into another type of narcissist and how this narcissist's behavior affects other individuals going unchecked. The investigative journalism is by Elissa Daly and Jerry Mitchell. In 2012, 3 months after Eddie Scott became sheriff of Clay County, Mississippi, a claim by a woman he had helped put behind bars threatened to tarnish his earliest days in office. The woman said in an April court filing that while chief deputy less than 3 years earlier, 2009, he had coerced her into a sexual relationship after she was arrested. If such an allegation is correct, that is an abuse of power, which demonstrates a lack of accountability for the office with which he is in, a sense of entitlement to behave that way, a form of manipulation to assert control over an individual, demonstrating an absence of emotional empathy, and accessing a residual benefit of having sex. Promising to use his influence, promised gain, in their rural community to keep her out of prison, she said the lawman drove her to a hog farm to have sex in his patrol car on at least 5 occasions. She laid out her allegations in State Circuit Court in October 2012 and asked a judge to overturn her prison sentence. To back up her story, the 26-year-old showed suggestive letters with a return address of the Clay County Sheriff's Office and signed by then Chief Deputy Scott, who was 47. "Hey, sexy," he wrote to her in prison 9 months before his election to the top job. "Got my blood pumping hard after reading the last 2 letters. Can't stop thinking of how tight it is. I want all of that and more if you can." This is evidently a Hoover, using some crude flattery. The revelations could have led to an internal investigation, a criminal inquiry, or a public reckoning for the newly installed sheriff. Instead, powerful officials in Clay County took no action. Judge Jim Kitchens ruled against the woman. Sheriff Scott's predecessor, Laddie Huffman, had known of the allegations before retiring, but did not report them to state or federal law enforcement agencies. There is no record of any internal investigation or disciplinary review. The court file for the woman's case, the only public record of the allegations, went missing at the Clay County Courthouse, likely for years. It was placed in the wrong filing cabinet, lost among hundreds of cases, until reporters pressed for it this summer while investigating other allegations against Sheriff Scott. In interviews, Sheriff Scott would not directly answer whether he had ever had sex with the woman. Deflection. When asked about his relationship with her, he called it a mistake. He denied coercing her. Denial. First line of the twin lines of the narcissistic defense. What she didn't tell was she was coming up to the office with her tits hanging out, he said. "I never put myself in that position any more." Smearing. Belittlement. But an investigation by the New York Times and the Mississippi Center for Investigative Reporting at Mississippi Today, which included dozens of interviews and a review of court records and exclusively obtained internal documents, found that during his 11 years in office, Sheriff Scott has repeatedly been accused of using the power of his position to harass women, coerce them into sex, and retaliate against those who criticize him or allege abuse. Now, it's worth pointing out that people who are in prominent positions, public positions, famous positions, are often at risk of an individual telling lies about them to suggest that something untoward has gone on when it has not. There are, of course, some people whose relationship with the majority reality is somewhat tenuous as a consequence of a mental health condition. There are, of course, other narcissists out there who, through a revision of history, believe that something has taken place between them and the famous person, and then makes allegations for the purposes of asserting control and drawing fuel, and perhaps seeking other residual benefits, a compensation payment. So it is important to make that point that false accusations are frequently found, particularly against those that are in a public position or a famous position. However, the fact that there have been repeated accusations of this nature starts to suggest that there is something in it, that the utilization of this power to harass women is being done out of a sense of entitlement and to assert control, that the fact that it's alleged that he used this power to coerce women into sex is seeking to assert control over them and draw a residual benefit. Furthermore, the fact that there is purported retaliation against those who criticize him or allege abuse is seen as a nullification of their threat to control. In rural communities like Clay County, dominated by farmland and economic hardship, some sheriffs rule like kings. They can arrest anyone they choose, assertion of control, smear reputations, smear, and hand out reprieves and other favours, assertion of control. They have enormous latitude to hold people in jail as long as they please, and they answer to no one, absence of threat to control. Therefore, such a role would appeal to a narcissist, typically facing little press or prosecutorial scrutiny. 3 months ago, the Times and Mississippi Today told the story of another sheriff's office less than 40 miles away. Former Noxubee County Sheriff Terry Grassery rose in the ranks of his Mississippi department and kept his elected office for years, despite similar accusations of abuse. He was voted out in 2019 and now faces federal charges of bribery. But in Clay County, Sheriff Scott remains in power, even after repeated allegations of misconduct. Accordingly, the suggestion is that we have a narcissist that has got a position of power which he wields in an absolute fashion, enabling him to assert control over people, particularly women, which are then coerced into having sexual intercourse with him, which provides a residual benefit and also fuel. That he does so without any accountability, without any restraint on his activity. Thus setting the scene, we'll hear more in Part 2 about the many allegations against him and how this fits with the narcissistic dynamic and shows to you another aspect of narcissism in action.